people? You know that sound? It is the Unfiltered Band. Means, yes, another episode of Unfiltered coming your way. Right here, right now. This will officially go down in your scorecard, episode number 303. You could jump on board 24/7, 365. It is easy. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can get to us a number of other ways. Twitter, or X, if you will, at Casey Stern. Give me a follow. Hop up into the bio. And there you can follow to the YouTube channel. You can get us on Instagram in both cases. Follow, like, subscribe at Unfiltered with Casey Stern. We are happy to have you. Always good to have the Unfiltered Band as well. Lot to get to here over the course of this show. A little short and sweet on a Memorial Day weekend. Get us some baseball, bounce around some storylines, hit some NBA, say goodbye to my Knicks because I haven't hit that yet on the way out, and whatever else. As always, you have ideas on guests, lists, conversations, whatever you've got, bring it to the table. Comment along the way on the videos on YouTube. Get to me on X or Twitter. We are always getting to you here on Unfiltered. In large part, thanks to our good friends at BetOnline. They're your number one source for all of your sports betting needs. The NBA, the NHL playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, every live stat, odd, and everything you can imagine with the games that are being played. When the game's over, head over to the online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker. Unwind with one of over 150 side games as well on the slots. You can head over to the website and get on all the action today. Don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You'll get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. It is BetOnline where the game starts, and we get started here. A lot to get to. First of all, let me get started saying this. Been a little hiatus here over the last week. Crazy with the kids ending school. For any of you who have kids, it's the last day of camp every time that they get into a situation where they end school. So there's lots of crying and there's upset and there's all sorts of things that you've got to plan. And then you realize that you've got them all the time during the course of the summer. So for parents who are going through all of that, I feel for you as well. And we say that, of course, lovingly, because we're blessed and grateful to have children, and they drive us nuts at the same time. Let's drive you around baseball and get to a number of things. I want to start with the Yankees. Juan Soto, when that trade went down, and people always ask it, I've been on radio stations in San Diego even recently where they ask about, and shout out to Kaplan and crew, where they will ask about the Soto trade and who won the deal. And the answer to those kind of things, I've always said this for, now 2 decades plus in this sport, you never win those kind of trades when you have the Soto player in that deal. Because the longer tick, 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 it gets to that point where you lose leverage and you've got to make a trade and you don't have a choice, well, you don't have hand, to use the Seinfeld term of the relationship, anymore. And then, therefore, you are going to lose in some way. You hope to gain some sort of a future. Most often, that's where you're going for, not in the now. You hope the kings of the world and those who are part of the now that you get in the deal will help you. And you hope that in total, you maximized what you could get. And that's a question that remains to be seen. But end of the day, we go back to where we were when this deal was made. You can go back on this podcast, and I'm not the only one who said this. Clearly, doesn't take rocket science. The Yankees got Soto to get him for this year, to win with him this year, to woo him this year, and to keep him long term. And so far, all of those things are going according to plan. All of them. Because he has been fantastic. And he put an exclamation point, at least on so far on the first half of his MVP campaign, if you will. And he was my pick and seemingly everybody else's before the season, with his home run at his second at-bat in the game against San Diego, in which he hit one off of Darvish, his 14th of the year, a game which we'll get to in a second, by the way, also where you saw Judge homer, also where you saw Stanton homer. In a lot of ways, those things are more important than even Soto, who now seems to be a given. But he'd been a given for years, and now he is in a spot where he about to earn crazy amounts of cash, and he is living up to all the expectations, but this should not be a surprise. I remember sitting there at the desk at Turner the first time that he was with the Nationals and joking after they did the on-field interview after he had a game-winning hit. I want to say it was maybe Game 5 against the Dodgers, if I remember correctly, in a wild card series. And I remember joking with the guys at the desk that he can't even go have a drink afterwards. Not even old enough. This guy's sitting there 19, 20 years old, not afraid of the spotlight. Nobody should be surprised. He's always embraced that. People act like he was bad in San Diego. He wasn't bad in San Diego. things were bad in San Diego, but it's been all Hallmark cards and flowers so far for Soto in New York. Let's get to the other part because it's important. You look at the numbers, I think it's something like I saw a stat 37-4. By the way, it's only 41 times, I guess, that we've seen Judge and Stanton homer in the same game. That's how unlikely it's been that they've even been healthy at the same times over the time that Judge has been a Yankee in his career and Stanton been a Yankee in this contract. But you think about what those two guys have done, the powering up of Judge over the last 25, 30 games, the way Stanton has shown signs of life, and then combined with Soto, whose numbers are across the board, almost 1,000 OPS, 14 dingers, over 40 ribs, hitting over 300, and all those things, 50-plus games into a season in which he's your leading MVP candidate, and everything for the Yankees has been coming up roses. Everything. And that's why they're sitting there, in case you're curious. That's why they're sitting there in first place. That's why they've got the best record right now in the American League, sitting there at 36-17. That's why they're sitting there with a 3-game lead in the American League Eastern Division over the Orioles. And they're not going away anytime soon. That mojo is there. Now, even better news for the Yankees, Garrett Cole on the mend, Garrett Cole on the come. And when Garrett Cole gets there, the fact that they've had the pitching that they have gotten, and the fact that they have been able to have the galvanizing of this starting rotation the way it has been, and have not even had Garrett Cole yet, tells you just how dangerous the Yankees are. I don't know, the Met fans who listen to me don't want to hear any of this. And, for those who don't know my background, I'm the only one in my family who didn't grow up a Yankee fan. But this is just the way it is. This is the way it is. The Yankees right now are as back to on top as they've been. Now, let's not forget, you go back to, 2020, the shortened season, and everybody basically handed them the World Series. And then Brasso, and they were knocked out by the Rays in the postseason, just like they were in the regular season. So there's a lot of time here, clearly. The things so far for New York have been good. Where they have not been good have been with the umpires. And let's get into this, because accountability and this is a life lesson, this is not a sports lesson. Accountability is sometimes the most difficult thing for people to deal with. All of us people to deal with. It is the biggest part of maturity and the biggest part of growing up as a human being in or out of sports. And that is being able to look in the mirror or to look at someone or in this case, a group of someone's and say, I'm wrong. I made the mistake. And then it's up to that person or persons, in this case, the public, whether or not we want to forgive. There is no accountability. There has never been accountability, and there seemingly will never, ever be accountability for umpires. Ever. And it is garbage. We could talk about the fact that I know that Commissioner Manfred came out and said the robot umps are not ready yet, seemingly not going to happen in 2025. We could talk about balls and strikes all we want. We could then go to Angel Hernandez all we want. We could then talk about CB Buckner and Laz Diaz and get into all the scenarios we want, but it's been going on forever. This has never been any different. There's no accountability for umpires, and I don't want to hear about you sitting there with a pool reporter for 3 minutes explaining something after a game. I want, if you are not good at your job, you shouldn't have a job. If there is a problem with the way you're handling your job, you should get better at said job. And if you're in a position where you're supposed to be like a teacher or a judge in a courtroom or a scientist or a doctor, somewhere where we are respecting your knowledge and you don't have knowledge and you are making mistakes and you are handling it, as I always joke around, where somebody's sitting there and telling a classroom that, hey, Columbus discovered Rhode Island, not America, in 1975, and the kids go home and that's how we live in baseball. We just don't do anything about the lack of accountability. And now we have the situation with the White Sox. That game-ending call with the interference. And everything is always discretion of umpires, although you would think. The rule, quote, it says Rule 6.01 seems to report that a runner is adjudged to have hindered a fielder attempting to make a play and a batted ball is out, whether it's intentional or not. However, Major League Baseball reached out, this is a courtesy of an ESPN article, reached out to the White Sox after the game to say the umpires do have the discretion on that play and that interference didn't have to be called. Chris Getz, White Sox GM, said, we've talked to Major League Baseball. Keep the conversations private. I was told it's a judgment play. There is discretion. If it's a judgment play and there's discretion, how do the umpires not seemingly understand, A, the rule, or B, what their judgment is supposed to be, or C, what they're allowed to do? And why are the rules different for every umpiring crew? And by the way, I'll take this interference call and I'll go to the collisions at the plate and the blocking of the plate, which is still a damn mess and a joke and has been a joke for a long period of time. And we just sit there and just deal with it. Well, human error. And look, I'm one of these, I'm an idiot in a lot of ways, but I'm one of these idiots that was sitting there for years saying, well, yeah, I don't want robots. I mean, umpires is part of the thing. And then, you had, Earl Weaver and Luke Piniella and Billy Martin and all my favorites who would, sit there and kick dirt and yell at umpires. And that's just part of the game. That's just part of the way that we are. That's the world we live in. That's reality. That human nature and human element. And even I've smacked myself in the head over the last few years saying, well, that's dumb. Let's just get it right. But we're still not getting it right. And what we're getting wrong more than anything else, people, is the lack of accountability because there seems to be none. Big problem. Curious your thoughts. Let me know. YouTube comments, of course, Twitter, X along the way at Casey Stern. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts, you can get to me on all the different platforms. And go like and friend and get on board because we are new to Instagram. So we're like MySpace and Tom and 7 other people so far. So get to us at Unfiltered with Casey Stern. It has been an unfiltered success across the board, barring the Harper ejection yesterday and some hiccups for the Phillies. Outside of that, it's been just brilliant. Best start in franchise history. And to me, there are a lot of things you could look at. We knew they could pitch, and they've pitched, right? Maybe better in the bullpen in some ways than you thought. But the Alec Bohm performance, the guy sitting here, hitting over 330, driven in nearly 50 runs. He's been fantastic. They've gotten it in parts of the batting order where they didn't think that they would get it. They've gotten big hits. They've been the best team in Major League Baseball here really to this point, them and the Yankees. And I'm sitting here in Atlanta telling you for months, as I'm sure a lot of people are, that anybody who's sitting there and tossing the Braves aside and thinking that the Dodgers are just easily going to waltz their way into a World Series in the National League is crazy because the Braves are really damn good, and they are. And they're right there in the National League East. I mean, they're certainly not far behind. We're sitting there a couple of games out right now at 29-19, right? So it's not the end of the world. It's 6 out. It's fine. It's still early enough. Braves have plenty of talent. Dodgers have plenty of talent. But the Phillies have done something they haven't been able to do the last couple of years, and they've flipped that script because their script has been, we are going to be sort of good enough, be a little bit above the muffin tops, and show you that we've got all the potential to be a dangerous team, and then wait until it gets to the end. And finally, when it gets to the end of the regular season, then we'll kind of pour it on enough, get into the playoffs, and we'll show you what we do into the postseason, which is put them in a World Series and put them up there against Arizona a year ago. But now they flipped the script and put themselves in a position where they have gotten out of the gates quick. Now the question will be, can they sustain it? And the one thing that we know is that they've got an ownership and a general manager who are going to be aggressive at the deadline to try and add and make themselves better. And that has put them in a playoff push scenario here the last couple of years. But now they're already kind of right there in the forefront. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this all pans out. But so far for Philadelphia, it has been brilliant. Speaking of Arizona, obviously not as much. Thankfully, Jock Peterson has been doing what he's done. They've had a couple of bright spots kind of hang around with what Corbin Carroll hasn't done. Speaking of slumps, Francisco Lindor, I get asked about this all the time. And I was sitting there before the season, and I was the one saying, hey, 6, 7 games in, how are you killing this guy? And I still believe that. Like, how are you booing the guy? Booing him not going to help 6, 7 games into a year if you're not playing well, you're not hitting well. Well, now he's sitting, sub 200, not doing very well across the board offensively at all. And we're sitting, 55, whatever games it is into the season. Now it's a big problem. Now it's a problem. And then you got people like reading into like when they went up into Cleveland, he cares. He still wishes he was in the Guardians and he misses winning. And look, I don't think that to me, the question that fans always have that just drives me bananas and has for years, right? And this is not about you're spending your years in clubhouses and makes me different than anybody else, because it doesn't. But one of the things is you kind of get on the inside and you learn and you talk to players, and I've worked with a lot of players over the years, And the one thing for me that I probably, especially growing up in the New York area as a fan, made the biggest mistake with in my childhood was where you sit there and you say, that guy doesn't care. Now, outside of Anthony Rendon, if you're an Angels fan, I know you feel that way. But that guy doesn't care, right? That guy doesn't want to win. It's not about that life, as we like to say, right? But that's dumb. Of course he wants to win. The problem is, like all of us in life, and we've all been through this, I've been through this, when things aren't going well, a lot of times in life, you try harder. And sometimes trying harder is the worst thing you could do. You know, everybody's sitting there in telling you whatever it is in your own life. And I always do it this way so that people can kind of understand what it's like. And then imagine it to like a grand scope of millions and millions of people watching at home, and people who are in the stands that are sitting there booing you or trying to cheer you and then booing you. And you've got a big contract and you understand the onus of that. And then you got the press and you got the mic. Imagine all of that. You don't have any of that. Excuse me. You don't have any of that. And you're sitting there and you're still having real life problems where at work or in a relationship or at home or whatever it is, you're in that spot where you're like, okay, things are going the other way. I'm trying harder. And somebody's sitting there saying, dude, hey, you just got to take a deep breath. You just got to relax, right? I always joke because I have the habit, it's a bad habit, of telling people to just breathe, right? And then really, it is kind of a stupid advice, right? Because it's like, okay, fine, right? But that's what people do. They tell you to just breathe, just chill. You got to just take a minute. Well, how you taking a minute? You're hitting sub 200 in the middle of a season that's coming at you every single day, and you're in New York in that cauldron with that contract, with those grand expectations of what you're supposed to do with it. And then here you are at this point in a season, still having this lack of success. Not easy. Not saying it's an excuse, because it's not, because it is his job and he is being paid to perform at a high level. There is no doubt about it. But now there's got to be real concern. The Edwin Diaz thing, the only other thing on the Mets that I want to hit for right now, because obviously they've not been great, and we understand that. The fact that they haven't had Senga has been a big problem for them. The Raley injury doesn't help. They've mixed and matched, trying to do what they can in the back of that bullpen. But then when you don't have Edwin Diaz, and not the case they didn't have him last year where he wasn't healthy, but he doesn't have that swagger. And that's the biggest thing that's missing. And I said this in the podcast I did a couple of weeks ago with Jim Duquette, if you missed it, and we talked about this. I think it's crazy that people have been surprised that Edwin Diaz, not the Edwin Diaz of old, because they think because it wasn't an elbow injury. So, like, why the hell? Who cares, right? It's not like you need your lower half. Well, how about the fact that outside of the fact that obviously you need it, in terms of pitching, he hadn't pitched at all and was rusty and was out of the big leagues, and now is coming back and has the pressure of the season he had. And I'll say what I said in that episode with Duke. It's like comparing. I remember going back in spring training, being there on the spring training tour that we used to do at MLB Network Radio when I was there. And the year after that second half that Jake Arrieta had. And that's still, in my 20 plus years covering the game, that's the best half a season I've seen pitched. Best I've seen as a fan was when I was sitting there in Boston in 99, Pedro. But the best that I've seen working, that half a season with Arrieta, I mean, I never seen anything like it. It was crazy good, right? So how do you sit there and you live up to that? Well, you can't. Like, there's no way. You go look at the numbers that Edwin Diaz has. It's like, Mason Miller, he gives up like a run. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Or he gave it 3 or whatever it was in one game. And it's like, oh my God, we didn't even know he's touchable. And that's like a kid just sitting there only through a couple of months of a season. Well, Edwin Diaz was dominant like that for a whole year. That's as dominant for a closer a year that we have seen. Go look at the numbers. Go dissect the numbers. How do you live up to that after all the rust? So it struggles. Now, to me, and he referenced this, and I think it's actually good. People take it the wrong way, and I think they think it's bad that he talked about his own confidence. But I think internalizing that, and Edwin Diaz realizing that his biggest issue right now is that swagger, is that confidence, is that he's not the guy with the trumpets. He's not. And you start to feel that, and then all of a sudden you start to promote that. Just like anybody who's not feeling confident. We've all been there, right? All been there. Yeah, that's why they say, like, go back to basics, right? Even in this business, you sit there and you watch old video, you listen to old record. Okay, that's where I was when I was, where I was at my best. That's why hitters look at their old mechanics. That's why actors and actresses, right? All that, singers, right? Everybody, no matter what you do in your walk of life, you go back to those. Edwin Diaz needs to go do that and get back to feeling good about himself, because clearly right now confidence is the biggest issue. But because I think confidence is the biggest issue, I'm not concerned. I think he'll come out of it. You just got to be gentle now if you're sitting there in your Carlos Mendoza in massaging the best position to put him in to get him out on the other side of that. And that's going to be something to watch. We're not on the other side of the first half of the season, but so far, can we talk about how ridiculous Shota Imanaga has been? Cy Young run so far, ERA under 1, 4-year, $53 million. Everybody, including me and everybody else, talking about all the big contracts and talking about all the big deals, the Soto trade, and talking about Ohtani, and then the pitching side, talking about Yamamoto, and talking about where was Blake Snell going to go, what was going to happen to Jordan Montgomery, and where was this guy going to go, and all of that, right? And here's Shota Imanaga, and we're like, okay, well, okay, I haven't seen any video. Let me see what people think. And okay, it seems like he could be good. That's kind of where it's really the chat. Okay, he could be good. Maybe he'll be a bit of a steal. A bit of a steal? Dude's been ridiculous. And you got hitters. I saw a quote from Bogarts, and hopefully he gets healthy. I know he's on the IL now. But among others, sitting there in a piece that I think I saw on ESPN after the McAfee interview, where they're talking about the fact that they think they're going to rope this guy and he's unhittable. Whatever he's doing is working, but Imanaga has been brilliant, and the Cubs have needed it. They've needed it. And that division is still really weird. And by the way, I hope, Kyle Hendricks is one of those guys I root for, and I hope that the bullpen demotion, and I know he's kind of taking it well, that he's able to kind of perform and find his way out of it. That division, these two Centrals, they're always this way, always nuts. I said this in a podcast recently, but I'll say this again. The fact that we are looking in the standings now, 55 games into a season, and that we have the Cleveland Guardians and the Milwaukee Brewers in first place, when you've got no David Stearns in Milwaukee, no Craig Counsell in Milwaukee, you've got Woodruff is gone and out and hurt, Burns is gone and out in Baltimore, and they're where they are. Guardians got no Terry Francona. I love Stephen Vogt. And this is not anything against Murphy or against Stephen Vogt, but you just talk about the culture that was left by Tito, the culture that was left by Counsell, and by all the things that were done, obviously, by David Stearns in that group and by Chris Antonetti and his group in Cleveland, Mark Shapiro before him. But you think about the culture and all of the things that we've talked about for years with these two teams, it's always been squeezing the most juice out of the orange, maximizing everything that you have, and all those certain things. And they're continuing to do all of those things without those people who we thought were responsible for them. And kudos to both of those teams. Is it sustainable? I don't know. Remains to be seen. I mean, the way Jeffers and the Twins have been at times, maybe they're to be believed. Certainly in the National League Central, I think, a lot of those teams are still kind of in the race. Chicago is the team that, before the year I thought was going to be the team to take this division, and I'll still stay there. And I think they'll be super motivated as the year goes on, especially with the way Imanaga has played, to put pieces around as we get towards a deadline here in a month or two that will push them to that next level. And those are things that Milwaukee is just not going to do. And in the American League Central, those are things that we know Cleveland, look, we've seen them do before, but it's unlikely that they're going to do it to the level that some other teams are going to be willing to. And that's going to be always something to watch. And, we're at that point in the season where, how early is too early to panic? We're past that. You now can panic. You can panic about players with Lindor. You can panic about teams. If you're sitting there and you're rooting for teams like, Houston, you thought you'd be in one spot and you're in another, or wherever you may be, or maybe you thought the Mets would be better than they are if you're a Met fan. I'm curious, what team do you root for that you think should have been way better than they have performed here so far in 2024? Get to me. We'll get a lot more MLB. Got some guests coming up this week. Now outside of the busy side of the school year with the kids and all this stuff, we'll have a lot more pods coming up. Did want to hit some NBA before I get out of here. Two things. First of all, I remember being at the draft and doing it for NBA TV when Luka was drafted. And it's amazing to see just what a dominant Hall of Fame force this guy has become. People sitting there complaining and talking about how, he's overweight, he's not in shape, he's slow, what position does he play? he just he's not an athlete. All the things they say, by the way, about Jokic, who now has what 3 MVPs. But Doncic has become such a closer and such a, you hate to overuse the term, but the late Kobe, the Mamba mentality. If there is that thing, we were always talking about different players, or we didn't think LeBron had it enough, or maybe Kevin Durant had it, or was it Steph Curry or whoever. And a lot of people have certainly been in that mind frame, but there's nobody that comes to mind for me right now more than Luka in this sport. And that shot over Gobert, the way he's put this team up 2-0, pretty impressive. Couple wins away now. He and Kyrie, speaking of which, who hit the biggest shot during the LeBron and Kyrie era, let's be fair, with the Cavs, now sitting there 2 games away from the finals. Just kind of an ode to my Knicks. I am not a fan of the moral victories in sports, not a fan of sitting there as a sports fan of my teams and saying, well, at least we got here. Like, at least we got to the playoffs. Like, I don't feel great that the Islanders snuck in, logo on top of me, if you're watching, right? The Knicks, and as a Knick fan, I'm proud of what this team did. The fact that they had, and they may have been a better playoff team constituted without Julius Randle, which is a major, obviously, question moving forward, right? But without Julius Randle, to lose OG during the points of the season where they're getting so hot after he came over in the trade, then to lose them in the middle of the series where they're at their hottest point, and they certainly look like a team that could go ahead and battle the Celtics or anyone else and look to have a legitimate shot. To have Brunson get banged up earlier in the series, to then lose Josh Hart and have him barely playing it and a shell of himself, to a point where Dante DiVincenzo is having to carry you, and by the way, brilliant, because then Brunson, he's out with a hand, and, look, it is what it is. The Pacers won that game, but who the hell knows? You go look at the gap that the Knicks cut to get it to halftime, and then go look at what happened in the second half, and you tell me Brunson was the best player in the freaking playoffs. That's not sitting there and crying over spilled milk. It's not being a baby. It's not being whiny. That's reality if you're a Knicks fan. You're the best player in the playoffs leading up to that. You're going to tell me it wouldn't have mattered with season on the line? That dude, the dude who basically said the year was a failure, even though they sat there where they did as far as they went with all the injuries they had, that mentality, you're going to tell me that guy being there wasn't going to help this team? So it's hard not to think about the what ifs, and it's hard not to think about that we're scorned and that we're I don't even know, like it's some kind of Greek tragedy being a Knick fan. But you got to be proud, and I am. And congratulations and thank you for a wonderful season. Thank you for being here. A lot more still to come. Again, guests coming up this week on the other side of Memorial Day. You got any ideas for conversations, list guests, whatever it might be? Just want to sit and conversate about sports, baseball, whatever it is. Get to me, Twitter, X, if you will, at Casey Stern. Hop up into the bio. That'll take you over. You can get to Instagram or YouTube, both at Unfiltered with Casey Stern. And of course, where most of you are, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your